live, but I'm still tweeting because I got to tell everyone to come. So you'll excuse me while I look down at the computer screen while I do this. We're going live at Healthcare Triage now! Exclamation point, exclamation, X point. Click on the link. And paste and fix my spelling and tweet and welcome to Healthcare Triage Live! It's always like, it's one of those where we think we're prepared and then at the last second it's always a sprint. We're glad you're here. We're glad to be here. Are you guys away next week or is it the week after? All right, so we'll still be here next week, so ignore that. But, we're not going to have as many Healthcare Triage Lives this month because the last 2 weeks of the month some of us or all of us will be out of town. Regardless, we're excited to be here today. Let's get going. Soon after I do the housekeeping, you should check us out at patreon.com/healthcaretriage where we appreciate all of your support. You should check out facebook.com/healthcaretriage. Check out all the videos. Mondays was on peanut allergies. You should have watched it by now. If not, you should go watch it now. Anyway, here we go. Alexis is Peachy asks, I know you've said that vitamins essentially make expensive pee, but what if you can't afford to get nutritious food often and are mostly eating carbs because you're super poor? Would vitamins help? So I say that, I think, just taking vitamins, you can't just put all vitamins together because, lots of vitamins are cheap, especially, the kind that, the multivitamin that you can get by the barrel at Costco is cheap. That's fine. I'm all fine with that. Go ahead, go take it. You don't need most of it, but so be it. It's when you're buying super mega doses of vitamin whatever, C, D, whatever the thing is this month. That's when you're making super expensive pee that doesn't make sense. So, you don't need to buy expensive vitamin. You could buy cheap vitamins that'll get you sort of up to the RDA of most of what you need. Having said that, it's most people in America are still probably getting the recommended daily allotment of what they need. Even if they don't think they're eating the most nutritious diet, because your body is pretty much built to try to hoard and store up on those vitamins. So that you don't die, even when food was scarce, because there's lots of times in human history when food was scarce. Now, I'm concerned, however, because you say you can't afford nutritious food and you're only eating carbs, and yet you have money to buy vitamins, because, vitamins don't give you nutrition. Vitamins are only covering you for vitamins. They're not going to give you protein. They're not going to give you fat. They're not going to give you cholesterol. They're not going to give you, other things. Although you don't really need cholesterol. I probably shouldn't have said that. You can build that from your fats. But you need to be eating other stuff for nutritional purposes than just vitamins. So I don't like the idea that you're only eating carbs. That doesn't make sense to me. Also because it's why carbs? What are you buying carbs that's so cheap? I need to almost have a discussion with you personally because I'm very concerned about your diet. Eat a wide variety of foods. Not all foods are expensive. And not all protein is expensive, not all vegetables and not all fruits are expensive, and not just carbs are cheap. And vitamins are not going to be giving you those things. Vitamins will give you vitamins. So if you feel like you need to take a vitamin, a cheap vitamin is probably likely fine, but you should also be eating a wide variety of foods. Christina Lay, what do you recommend for weaning babies? Whole milk has been the traditional drink, but what is the better alternative? That's the traditional drink. We start out with either breast milk and or formula. And then when you get to 1 year age, we transition to milk, whole milk, because we believe you need the fat. And then as you get older, we recommend you transition off the whole milk, to low-fat milk, and then finally non-fat milk. And that's the point when I start looking at you crazy and say, why are you still drinking so much milk? Drink it because you like it, but not because you need it. Once you sort of get out of the toddler, young child period, you need calcium, but there are other ways to get it. Most people are not deficient, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, that's the milk. Our mechanism goes breastfeeding to whole milk, then, getting off so much fat. That's what pediatricians recommend. That's what family physicians recommend. That's what pretty much the whole world recommends. And that is therefore where it is. When we talk about things like soy milk, almond milk, those are not milk. Those are not milk. Milk has a definition. It is not a white liquid. It's the thing that mammals produce to feed their young. And we get ours mostly from cows. Some people like to drink it from other animals. But that's what milk is. Breast milk is the milk that we humans make, or that we call breast milk, even though technically it's all breast milk, I suppose. And so that's it. I don't know what alternatives you're looking for. Is it another animal's milk? It's not usually what we do. Is it soy milk or rice milk or almond milk? Again, those are not milk. So the whole milk is what we recommend. Of course, you could always just breastfeed until weaning and then be done with the whole milk thing too. That would require us to breastfeed a lot longer than we traditionally do, but that is what many people still do. Cassie Angel, hi. What are your thoughts on the new laws in California and a few other states that allow women to have access to birth control without seeing a doctor? Well, we should say it's not all birth control. You're going to have a hard time getting an IUD placed without a doctor because it's a procedure. And you're also going to have, I think, you're going to need to see a medical professional to have some of the implantation, Norplant or something else done. I assume you're talking about like birth control pills, which for the most part, I'm fine with personally. Speaking as Aaron Carroll, as long as you sort of ask the questions that you need to about medical history. I mean, there's nothing magical about asking questions about someone's medical and or family history, and then deciding if birth control pills are right for them. Others can do that. Of course, they still do require someone to ask those questions and do that. And so you don't need a doctor, but you still need a professional. Like, it shouldn't be like we're dispensing them likely in vending machines because you still want to ask some questions. But we should make it as easy as possible for women to be able to get birth control. The idea that we have to require an expensive doctor's visit or appointments or hoops for people to jump through sort of gets away from the purpose of all of this to begin with. And so I am all for making access significantly easier, but you still do want to have the safety checks that are necessary in order to make sure that everything's okay. Elizabeth, there you go. How wide does granular scar tissue form? If you've had issues with it once, what are the chances of having it happen again, particularly when it occurred postpartum, and why is it so darn painful? So, the body sometimes when it heals doesn't heal as nicely or cleanly as you would like. And sometimes the tissue gets gnarly or nasty, and sometimes it can hurt. The biggest reason for people to have surgical obstruction of their GI tract and have a problem in obstruction that actually becomes so bad they have an emergency about it, number one reason for that is prior surgery, because when the bowel heals or when the body heals, it doesn't always do it cleanly and nicely, and sometimes it can create these strictures and other things which make it then likely that you get this. So even when women have had like C-section or something like that can make it more likely later that they're going to go in and have some kind of bowel obstruction. And sometimes even on the surface, you get scar tissue which gets so sometimes it happens in certain races, sometimes it happens in certain, I'm sure, genetic predispositions, sometimes it is just bad luck. Because it does happen to run in some groups and others, that does mean that if you've had it happen, it's probably more likely to occur again. I don't know if the postpartum makes it more or less likely to happen again. Why is it painful? Because sometimes it pulls and pushes your body in ways that it otherwise normally wouldn't. And pulling and tugging and doing different things to the body can cause pain, especially if it's pulling or tugging on nerves. And the nerves are not always smart. They just know, hey, I'm getting yanked or I'm getting shoved or I'm getting pushed. The only things I can do is make it feel something, and that is often pain, because that's the body's sometimes default explanation for something's going on, pay attention to me. Talk to your doctor. Talk to your doctor about figuring out what the best thing to do is with that. Then it's impossible for me to give you individual advice, of course, but you should speak to your physician. Meg Blount asks, have you read any books or poetry about being a doctor? I just took a class in narrative medicine and wondered if you had any favorites or recommendations. Yes. What a great question. I can't honestly say that I have poetry that comes to mind, but books on being a doctor, there are lots. There are just the ones that everybody mentions and go-tos. The House of God. I remember reading that, I think I was in college. And at the time, I sort of rolled my eyes at it because I thought it was like, oh, they're just making, it's not really as bad or horrible as they say. And then I went through residency and fellowship and realized that, my God, it's way worse. And I think, like sort of the doctor that went through it, came away from a lot of the experiences in residency burned and slightly bitter, and I think, but I enjoyed that book a lot. Ironically enough, one of my friends from medical school, I think, actually wound up in residency training under one of the doctors in that book. I can't remember what the guy's name. It was the Fleet. I can't remember. Was it the Fleet? Whatever. One of the internal medicine docs. He became, I think, an infectious disease doc. One of my friends in medical school trained under that guy when he went to do residency. But that book had an impact on me. A lot of people like, I think, The Doctor, which is also made into a movie. It's a doctor that gets throat cancer and it changes the way he has an outlook on life. I think Atul Gawande writes amazing books about being a doctor. He's a physician. I would recommend anything that man writes. What else? I'm sure there's also fiction that I've enjoyed. I'm having a harder time coming up with it on the spot. But this is a great question and something I will think about and maybe, tweet at me or something like that to remind me, and I will get back to you. But there's lots of even just books on stuff even that gets sciencey that I love. I mean, I think Jack Wenberg's book on over-treatment and how we do that too often, and I know I blogged about that, is phenomenal. And it's not narrative in the sense that you would consider narrative, but it explains his sort of quest to talk about treatment and the geographic variation in the practice of medicine, and that's truly impacted me and sort of how I talk and write about medicine. I think that, as we've talked about on this channel before, especially when what was his name? He passed away a couple years ago, and he wrote the handbook, Sackett. He wrote the handbook on evidence-based medicine, and that book, probably more than any other book in medicine, changed my life. I mean, that just, his handbook on evidence-based medicine just totally changed the way that I think about statistics and how we should make decisions, and that tons of the information I've given you, and sensitivity and specificity and positive and negative predictive value and likelihood ratios and Bayes' theorem and how we should screen out, all of that is evidence-based medicine. And David Sackett, man, wrote the book, and that we talked about it in the episode where we almost did a eulogy for him, but totally worth reading. He tweeted me. We could have this discussion for hours. Nick Sullivan, have you seen the silly promotional video for the Squatty Potty? Is there any truth to its health claims? I have seen this video because Mark made me watch it before we did this, and the video is awesome. With the unicorn and sort of the old Englishy, I don't know, Prince or whatever that guy is. The video is really entertaining. Now, the science, I don't know. I could buy an argument that we were made to squat to poop, because that sort of makes sense, and sort of like left to our own devices, whenever we don't have a toilet, I can imagine we would squat to poop. Now, do I think that our lack of squatting to poop is the cause of my ulcerative colitis, as they insinuate in one of their videos? No. I think I probably would have had that event. Hemorrhoids? I don't know. I mean, it depends how hard you have to push or not. No, also, I don't know that really sitting on a toilet makes it that much harder to poop. Having said all of that, as always, I'm a big believer in weighing the benefits versus the harms. Other than the economic cost of buying a Squatty Potty, I'm having a hard time coming up with harms for raising your feet a bit while you poop. And if you find benefit from that, man, more power to you. Who cares? Go ahead. So I will actually say I do not know, but I'm not incensed that they may be claiming that it might be easier for you to poop if you put your feet up a little bit. That may be true. Telling you that that's why colitis and all these other, whatever it was, I mean, they had a whole list of things that they say developed once we started sitting down to poop. That's where they might be going a little bit off the rails. But weigh the risk and the benefit. What's the Squatty Potty cost? I have no idea. If you think it's worth it, by all means try it. Even if you're getting placebo effect, who cares? Again, other than the economic cost, I can't really see much in the way of downsides here. James, other than rest, ice, compression, elevation, is there anything I should be doing for a calf strain? I'm on day 3 and I'm going a little crazy with the whole doing nothing thing. Nope. Maybe, I guess theoretically you should talk to your doctor before you take any medication, but an NSAID like ibuprofen or something, which might reduce some swelling and pain, might be beneficial too. Otherwise, rest, ice, compression, elevation, heat. I mean, ice, heat, whatever works for you. Compression, elevation, those are about reducing swelling. Rest is about letting it heal. Those are common sense things. They have very little in the way of downsides, probably some up in the way of upsides. But you're doing all the right things. Unfortunately, you have a calf strain, you got to let it rest. Why are you doing nothing, though? You can walk. I mean, you can still do stuff. I mean, maybe you can't. But, entertain it yourself. Work your mind. Read a book. Morning Peasant asks, in one episode of Healthcare Triage Live, Aaron mentioned in passing there isn't much evidence to support taking fish oil supplements as being beneficial. Was wondering what the research says about how effective EPA and DHA fish oil supplements are for treating depression. Particularly interested in how they can be used for treating depression and those with a history of being clinically underweight due to illness. I'm going to guess that there's not much in the way of really good science that shows that, because if there was, I'd imagine I would have heard of it. That sounds egotistical when I say it out loud, as if I'm the center of the universe of what is known for research. It's possible there's research. If there is, I really think you should send it to me because I'd want to talk about it. But I don't know of any, and therefore, especially given, again, supplements are so unregulated, you have no idea what you're getting. I was just reading a story where, I was listening on the radio and someone was talking about like how athletes these days are panicked about taking supplements because they could have some substance in there they're not allowed to take that'll get picked up on testing, because that's how supplements work. You have no idea what you're taking. Don't do it for the most part. So I don't think there's really probably much in the way of good research that shows you're treating depression by taking fish oil supplements. I'd look into it. Maybe there's some studies, but I'm going to guess not big, large, randomized controlled trials that will be convincing. Year of Hamster asks, hi, due to humidity, sometimes I hate wearing my glasses. I feel your pain. My mom says it'll make my vision... Oh, your mom. She says it'll make your vision worse. Is that true? Does regularly not wearing prescriptions to correct vision problems have any long-term cumulative effects? I mean, we don't have randomized controlled trials here because, of course, we're not going to be like, randomize people to not wear their glasses. But I do not think that your vision is nearsighted or farsighted is due to the shape of your eye, really, not because your muscles got tired or because like your lens isn't working. This is the same as like arguing that reading in the dark causes your bad vision, and that is a myth, and we've disproven that. We have to have done that in Healthcare Trash. Regardless, I've done it in my book. It's in the first book. It was even in the BMJ paper that started it all back in like 2007 or 8. I mean, that was one of the first myths we attacked. It is not true. And I would say in the same way, it's not proven in any kind of way that not wearing your glasses is going to make your vision worse. But you could try contacts. I hate them. That's why I wear glasses. But you could try them. And you could also try better glasses that maybe don't feel so icky when it's humid. And I would also imagine your vision's not so... Like, if I took these off, and I can't see. I believe that's Mark sitting over there at this point, but I'm not positive. But, like, I can't see almost anything. So it's like, I could not really function. I mean, I certainly couldn't drive. I'd have trouble at work. I don't know if I could see the computer. So it's like, I have to wear the glasses. I have no choice. I mean, if your vision is so mild that you can just still get around pretty well without it, then okay. But I'd imagine that... it would make life more difficult not to have your vision corrected. So talk to your optometrist, talk to your doctor, try to find another solution. But your mom's not right. I'm reading your book, Don't Cross Your Eyes, in its Chinese translation. It's been a great resource to me. Thanks. That makes me happy. Partially because I have no idea if the Chinese translation is actually accurate. One of the funny parts, if you publish a book, one of the greatest parts for me has been like I have this nice collection, I keep it in my office, of the book in many other languages. I keep it at home too, but it's like, and so it's cool to look at. But I have no idea if like they translated it correctly. For all I know, they could have taken all the myths and made them all true. I don't know. So it makes me happy to know that you're reading it in Chinese and that it all was done correctly. So that's great. T asks, I was diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic 20 years ago. But they said I'd probably be cured of it by now. What kind of realistic expectations did I set for the next 20 years? Well, clearly they lied to you back then. Why? I'm dying to know why in like 1996 they told you we'd cure diabetes in 20 years. Is that because they were just overly optimistic or because they thought you'd outgrow? I don't know. Diabetes is not something you outgrow. When your pancreas stops producing insulin, your pancreas stops producing insulin. We have no way to bring a pancreas back. Now, we can do pancreas transplants, but the only time we ever really do those is when we're doing other transplants to begin with. And it's like, well, as long as we're going to, for instance, like take out your kidneys, we might as well fix your diet, or give you a kidney transplant, we can fix your diabetes at that point. But either way, you're stuck on drugs for the rest of your life, either the immunosuppression drugs that come with all those other transplants, or the the drug to do or the insulin to take care of diabetes. But there is no curing diabetes. Now, can we do it in the next 20 years? Maybe. We haven't been very good at it so far. We keep coming up with sort of fancier ways to do insulin. We keep coming up, but we have just not yet found a way to make the pancreas come back to life. Maybe we'll do better prevention. There's talk, maybe we could do it. We don't have a lot of, we can't, the number of people with diabetes so massively outweighs the number of pancreases that we could pull out. It's hard to do. Maybe someday they'll figure out how to do a xenotransplant, like from an animal. You can get a pig pancreas or something. But again, that'll come with its own side effects and issues. So lots of people are trying to work on a cure for diabetes, but I'm a skeptic in the sense that, like, I have been hearing, this is when I get upset and I go off on my rant about like how I think health services research gets maligned, because it's like, people who are trying to come up with a cure for diabetes are trying to hit that proverbial grand slam. It's going to be huge and exciting if it ever happens, and we're dumping a gazillion dollars into it all the time. But health services researchers, we're conducting research every day to try to get better type 1 diagnosis management, better type 1 management. We're putting in a grant literally as I speak to try to improve adolescent type 1 diabetes self-management, trying to use information technology and more patient-centered outcomes technique. I literally kid you not, as I speak, the grant is being, the final details are being put in to route it through Indiana University, and then off to the NIH it goes. Because we need to do that kind of bread and butter, but for some reason it's not exciting. Nobody wants to donate money. Nobody donates money for a chair of like, let's try to improve adolescent self-management of diabetes. We want a cure, but 20 years later, all the work we got, we're making progress in trying to do self-management. And you're right, they promised you 20 years ago there'd be a cure, and there isn't one yet. I wish we spent money not so disproportionately, because hitting singles every day can make a really solid winning team. Hitting a grand slam might win you a game and might make it's really exciting, but which do you want? So I don't know. That's my, I know I'm biased there. I'm a health services researcher. What do you want? But what realistic expectation should you set for the next 20 years? I don't know that we're like that much closer to a cure. I'm sure you could find scientists who disagree with me. I know we're spending a lot of money and really working on it. Maybe we'll come up with it, some kind of gene therapy or something else, or some way to make the pancreas turn back on. I hope we do. That'd be awesome. Awesome. But I don't know. And I wouldn't tell anyone 20 years. I would not set a definitive deadline like that. We get burned with that all the time. How have EMRs I'm just looking at the time, affected physicians' approaches to care? Helpful, harmful, burnout? Man, this is my shtick. I've got, most of my work is in information technology and clinical decision support. I've written a ton about EMRs, written about it in the blog. We've talked about it here. I'm sure we've talked about it in the Upshot at the New York Times. So I'm a huge proponent of information technology and electronic medical records. I think that they are a massively good thing in order to try to improve quality. I think that they have been oversold and underwhelming, especially in terms of reducing costs. I also think that we pay far too little attention to the quality improvement and human aspects of EMRs. A couple years ago, the American Medical Association and I think RAND did a poll where they, an actual study where they talked to physicians about reasons for dissatisfaction in their practice. The number one reason for a physician dissatisfaction was not malpractice, it was not regulation, it was not the government's telling me what to do, it was not dealing with insurance companies. Number one reason for dissatisfaction, working with an EMR. They hate them. And as a physician who works with an EMR, I often hate our EMR. Like, they make mistakes that are just literally programming one-on-one. I'll tell you a quick story. I went to they teach me how to do this, and I'm pretty tech savvy. Like I said, I've built EMRs. My fellowship project was I built an EMR to be used on a Palm Pilot for the use in the NICU. Palm Pilots back then, you youngins don't know, Palm Pilots were all the rage back in the late 90s. They were the sort of devices everyone was going to use, and I thought, well, this is it. We're going to build an EMR on Palm Pilots, and it's going to be awesome, and you can go look up the papers because the results were meh, and therefore we didn't go for this Palm Pilot EMR. Regardless, I know a lot about how to use technology and computers, and one of the things they did was said, here, what you do is if you want to write a letter for a patient, click this communicate button, and this letter will just automatically come up. And I'm like, that's pretty cool. And so I'm in clinic the next week, and I'm trying to write the letter, and I'm like, I keep clicking the communicate button, and it goes up to the screen. I have no idea what I'm doing. And it's not what I want. I close it down. And I'm getting so upset about it because now the patients are waiting. I'm trying to get this letter done. I keep clicking the communicate button. I check my notes. It says click the communicate button. I finally call tech support, and I'm like frustrated. I'm like, I'm clicking the communicate. And they're like, well, what you got to do is click the button that says communicate. And I'm like, I'm clicking the button that says communicate. And they say, oh, no, not that button that says communicate. The other button that says communicate. It is programming 101. You do not put two buttons on the same screen with the same name. That makes no sense. You would never, ever do that. You don't have two buttons that say OK on a screen because no one will know which one to go. But there were two buttons that said communicate. The same exact. How do you create a monstrously huge EMR that has that? I mean, insane. People hate their EMRs. I've written so many times, and doctors are so upset about them. They feel like they get in the way. They're not. They are just. I wrote an editorial on JAMA Pediatrics called "The Failed Promise of Information Technology" because 20, 30 years ago, we were still being told that this is right around the corner. It's going to be awesome, and it's just not. Are there ways to fix that? Sure. Have we not done a healthcare triage on EM? We should do one on that if we have not. I'll pull together some stuff. We'll do a whole episode on that. Next question. Anyway, I feel like I didn't answer your question. How have they affected physician approaches to care? All over the map. Some ways they improve it, some ways they make it worse. Some ways they're helpful, some ways they're harmful. Is it burnout in the sense that it's another factor that's making physicians pissed off? Yeah, I'm sure it contributes to burnout, especially when they say it's the number one reason for dissatisfaction. However, I always take all claims of physician burnout with a grain of salt because, it's a great gig. I just gave commencement address at High School of Medicine, and that was part of the theme of my talk. This is still a phenomenal gig. Doctors like to complain. They've been complaining for decades. It's still an awesome job. Medical students graduating should be very excited to be doctors. Can we as citizens do anything to lower healthcare costs? I try simply by staying healthy, minimizing risky behaviors, and avoiding healthcare. Well, yeah, that'll help. You could vote for policies that you think are more likely to lower healthcare costs. You can try to spend healthcare money wisely. The best way I know is try not to spend money on ineffective or unnecessary care and target your healthcare spending to stuff that works. That's harder said than done, unfortunately. Terrytown, we'll end here. Any thoughts on Rogue One trailer? I thought it looked cool. I didn't even know that movie was coming out. I was sort of blown away. I thought it was going to be a TV show. I don't know where I was living, but I just saw it. Where did I see it? Was it the X-Men movie or maybe it was Civil War? I was surprised. Is that the same Mon Mothma that they use in all the other movies, or did they just get someone who looks just like her? I was paying attention to that. Look, I just spent the last few months finally watching the Clone Wars series. What was that on? Comedy Central? Not Cartoon Network, whatever that was on. And I was blown away about how good it was. I'd watched season 1 and I thought it was but man, season 5. When Ahsoka walks off at the end of season 5, which is probably where they should have ended the series. I mean, bawling I was. It was amazing. Plus, it added so much depth for the idea of you could when Mace Windu says to her "Oh, I'm sorry we screwed the hell out of you, but the Force works in mysterious ways." Man, I hated the Jedi Order at that point, and I was I could see if I was Anakin, to the Jedi Order, I'm ready to tell all you to go take a flight. So it's it added context and depth of how the Jedi Order had lost its way and how the Clone Wars had corrupted the Jedi Order and how they'd had to abandon so many of their principles and lie and do other things, and how someone like Anakin could be fine. Ahsoka walked away. She's awesome. And because she's I'm done with all you. So it made Revenge of the Sith, so much better. And I thought it was so good. And then I've been watching Rebels, and I love it. And when Ahsoka came, screw the spoilers. I love Rebels as much, and I'm really enjoying that. Maybe not as much as season 5 of Clone Wars, but I'm still liking that. And so this whole sort of expanded universe thing, I'm really I'm getting more and more into. Some of the books are really good, but I have faith that Rogue One trailer or Rogue One could be good. We'll see when we get there. Thanks for watching Healthcare Triage live. Please watch Healthcare Triage, and please watch Healthcare Triage News. Check out our merch, httmerch.com. Think about supporting us on patreon.com/healthcaretriage, facebook.com/healthcaretriage, and of course, Healthcare Triage on YouTube for all your healthcare triage needs. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.